What's up, everyone? Welcome to Level 7. It is time for another episode of the Agents of Fandom podcast. I'm your host, TJ Zwarich, and we are finally getting into some brand new content territory. We've covered What If and Echo to start the new year, and now we are diving in to Percy Jackson and the Olympians. I am joined, as always, by my co-host and good buddy, Adam Blevins. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. It feels so good to be here to talk about something different. I feel like anytime we load up this podcast, it's so often Marvel, Star Wars, with like a little pinch of DC. So to get to talk about a show that I know I'm really enjoying, and I think a lot of people are enjoying as well, is a really exciting prospect, man. I can't wait to get into it.
2024 really is going to be the year of us diving into some new content because it is a lot quieter on the Marvel side of things outside of, a lot of Sony movies coming this year, which we're not going to cover. We'll talk about a little bit, but we're not going to cover as in depth as a lot of the MCU projects. And so we got Percy Jackson and the Olympians, as well as a lot of other great shows we're looking forward to covering this year. Joined as well by one of our fellow agents back on the podcast for the first time in a couple months. Em, I miss you. I feel like I don't see your face as often as I usually do. Emma Doris, how you doing?
I'm good. I know, it's weird. It feels like I haven't done podcasting in a while either. I feel like I'm rusty, so forgive me if, what I say makes no sense because it's been quite a while since I've been recorded. But I'm doing good, and it's nice to see all of you guys.
Well, it's not like we're doing these typically very mistake-free. So definitely, if you mess something up, that's just par for the course for us. Don't worry about it whatsoever. And this is a fun little collab we got today because last time Emma and I got to meet up in person was in New York for New York Comic-Con. And one of the lovely people we got to meet there was our guest today, host of the Seaweed Brain Podcast, Erica Ito. How are you doing?
Hey, that was really fun. We did meet in line for we were like the press line. Shout out to Liam Crowley for sneaking me into the press line where I should not have been, so that we could run into that room. At the time, we weren't talking on our podcast about the TV show because the SAG strike was still in effect. So I was going to Comic-Con as a civilian, and I was just gonna enjoy it as a fan. But luckily, we know too many people to have had that pure fan experience. So ended up in we were the third row or something in the big ballroom. It was awesome.
That was so cool.
Yeah.
It really was so cool because so Liam got me in as well, because even for the press, we were supposed to have to sign up and apply for these things. And I was I had it in my cart for Percy Jackson and the Olympians for the panel, and it just sold out right at the last second as I was going through. So I never actually got mine. Em did, and so she goes through the line first, clicks, it works, and then I go, and I'm and it goes as he scans me, but he sees I have the press badge, and I don't think he really knew what was going on. So he was like, "Oh, weird, you're press. All right, go ahead." And so we just start walking in, and right as we walk in, it's like you said, Liam Crowley, all 6'1" billion of him, is the first person in the line. Yep. And he's like, "Hey, TJ, Emma." And so there was already 75 to 100 people ish ahead of us. And we just got to go right to the front to where you, Erica, were with Liam. And we all had a great time. We were waiting and then got to run right to the front. We got our Camp Half-Blood t-shirts, which I'm already upset that I'm not currently wearing. Maybe I need to wash it again. Change into it quick.
Mine is in the laundry. Yeah, there have been too many occasions. I need at least 3, I think, so they can be in rotation.
Exactly.
I have this one today.
Nice, perfect for this week.
Hot topic.
Perfect.
For those listening in podcast form, Erica's sporting the Lotus Casino t-shirt. And if you're listening to us on the podcast, make sure you give us a nice 5-star rating and review.
Do it.
And you can, of course, find the Agents of Fandom wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, where make sure you're smashing that like button for us, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and, of course, follow us on social media as well. It's at Agents Fandom on Twitter and TikTok. Agents of Fandom everywhere else. But let's start diving into Percy Jackson because there's so much to talk about. Obviously, we're not going to go each episode by episode covering each of them specifically. We'll spend a little bit more on episode 6 because that is the one that just dropped. But before we even do so, I want to talk about how we were all introduced to this, because I brought in some serious veterans of the project here. Whereas me, I believe I read the first 3 books as a kid, and then life got busy. They weren't coming out as quick because I'm an old man, and they were all of a sudden starting to come out a little more recently, and I wasn't able to keep up with it. And then diving into this series, beginning to do press for it in New York Comic Con was really where I found out, like, oh shit, this fandom is huge. This is not like your regular book fandom that's getting adapted into a movie. This is Harry Potter before the movies got worldwide. This is like a passionate fan base that really, really cares about the project. And obviously got to do some really, really exciting press for Agents of Fandom before the series came out. Interviewed Walker Scoble, Leah Savage Jeffries, as well as Aryan Samadri, and they are just the coolest kids ever. And you can find that up on YouTube as well as up on our website and wherever you get your podcasts. Erica, I want to throw it to you first because we, of course, met at a Percy Jackson fan panel. I find out you have a Percy Jackson podcast, the Seaweed Brain Podcast. When did you start that? Why did you start that? And where did your fandom begin?
Yeah, so I actually co-host Seaweed Brain with my best friend who we met when we were 10, Carter, and we like read the books together growing up. We always had a kind of friendship where I'm sure all of you guys are familiar with, and many people watching, where like you basically just hang out with your friends and talk about books and talk about movies, and that's all you do. And you drag your friends to see movies with you, and like all you're doing is talking about interpreting the media and blah blah blah. And so we always had that kind of relationship, and we read the books together. And the foundational lore of our podcast is that Carter spoiled a very important plot point of the House of Hades for me about my favorite character, which I won't say here just in case no one's read it, but they spoiled a very big plot point for me and then owed me in blood ever since. And so then in 2020, we both got sent home from college. We reread the books, and it was about the same time that the original Disney Plus announcement from Rick and Becky came out, where they're like sitting in their backyard and they're like, good news, demigods, like we're working on something and it's not official yet, but we're officially telling you. And so we were like, ooh, what if we started a podcast now? So that whenever the show comes out, maybe in a year, we'll be able to talk about the show on the pod, because we've always loved the books, but we're both like very passionate about TV, very big TV people. And so we were like, oh, our favorite book series in a TV show, that's going to be a dream come true. So we started the pod in 2020, and then we read literally everything Rick has ever written, except we haven't hit the Kane Chronicles yet. We're keeping that for when we need content to cover. So yeah, we covered everything. We finished House of the Gods, the most recent book, right before the show started dropping. And then got to go to the premiere at the Met in New York City, which was best night of my life. And we've been doing, analysis episodes, really long, up to 2-hour analysis episodes on the pod of every episode of the show. And it's been great.
Not if you're listening to the Agents of Fandom and you're a fan of Percy Jackson and you want more Percy Jackson content, check out Seaweed Brain Podcast and check out, of course, Riptide Radio, the live after show hosted by our friend Liam Crowley and Nicole Drum, because there is some really great Percy Jackson content creators out there, and we are very thrilled to have one of them on here with us. So that's such a great story, Erica. I love hearing that. That's so much of like that's what Spider-Man is for me. That's what Spider-Man was like. My whole life's fandom was based. It started there and then it branches out, and that's the character that has always been so important to me. And so I love hearing those stories about a specific thing for someone else. I know you came onto this fandom a lot more as an adult, and it kind of took you by storm because it's not just something you went, oh, like that's a project I like, that it's now a love. So talk to me about that.
Yeah. So basically when I was younger, I'm a huge reader now. Like that's like most of my personality. But when I was younger, I would read like a few series. Like I was really into like fantasy, and I read like the Warrior Cat series. That was like huge for me in like middle school. But there was a lot of book series that I just missed or just like wasn't aware of. I read only the first Harry Potter and then abandoned I was like, I don't really like this. But I would have loved Percy Jackson when I was younger if I had like found it at the time. But I also was a little bit, TJ and I are in the same age, a little bit older by the time like some of the books were coming out. So I just kind of was doing other stuff. But I decided last year, because I knew the Percy Jackson show was coming out, I was like, it's time for me to finally read these books. So I read The Lightning Thief and absolutely like fell in love with it. I'm like, this is genuinely one of the best books I've ever read. Like, just I don't know what it was. Oh, we just Erica got blipped. Best, honestly, just like amazing characters, and one of the like biggest things about Percy Jackson is that he, like everybody in the fandom knows, he has ADHD, he has dyslexia, and so being like newly diagnosed with ADHD in the past year or so, and then reading this book, I was like, oh, I feel like I really, even though he's like 12 in the book, I really connect with this character, and so it's one of those things that even though I missed it when I was younger, it came to me later in life when I honestly really needed it. So yeah, basically I have fallen in love with the fandom. I haven't read all the books yet because, again, ADHD, and I read like one book of a series and then just like for some reason cannot like finish the entire series until like it takes me a while. But I'm in the middle of Sea of Monsters right now and I'm loving it. So it's just so fun, and I just love everything about it. Like I can't even describe. So I'm fully in it now.
I think that is the aspect that you touched on right there about Percy Jackson that makes him so relatable to so many people. Is think of how many of us, whether it's ADHD like myself and you, whether it's the dyslexia, whether it's any type of learning disability or learning exceptionality that people either thrive with, struggle with, deal with on a day-to-day basis, kind of however it goes for them. Here, if all of a sudden you get a Sally Jackson in your life who says like, no, you're not broken. That actually is your superpower. How much that can mean to hear, and then to see it fully personified in Percy Jackson through his whole experience is so cool and ultimately relatable to so many people. Adam, what was your experience with the Percy Jackson series? Because I thought you were more like me and just were diving into the series for the first time. I didn't realize you've actually read the book series.
Yeah, I was surprised when right before we started this podcast, you were like, I'm looking forward to getting your perspective on somebody that has no familiarity with the books. And I'm like, well, first off, I've read all the books.
I was like, my bad.
Yeah, I will admit it has been a while since I read. And I don't know if I can say technically that I've read all of the books because I know there's a lot of them. I know I read at least like 4 or 5 when I was younger. And I recently reread the first one when, we had fellow agent Brandon, who is such a huge fan of this series as well. I was like also unfamiliar with how passionate the fan base was, and then reading and having the chance to actually edit some of his articles as well really inspired me to like get back into this and kind of read the books. And while I have that like familiarity, I definitely don't have that same connection. But it's like I remember being young, and I don't have ADHD or dyslexia, but part of what's so relatable about Percy, like you were talking about, TJ, is that feeling like something's wrong with me, and then like that like sense of not belonging anywhere, feeling like you don't belong anywhere. And I remember growing up and like relating to that, and then also finding that it's like just because you may not share the same interests as other people, or like people are making fun of you, all these kinds of things, that doesn't mean, like you said, that there's nothing wrong with you. So that's I don't know, and you touched on that good too, like all these things that are so relatable about Percy. But I don't know, it's been interesting to kind of be on like I don't, nobody likes a fence sitter, but I'm not one of the more passionate people, but I'm also not somebody that's not like knowledgeable about it. And I know we're going to get into the specifics about how we feel about it as an adaptation and like a project on its own, but I don't know, like my connection is definitely not as deep as some other people, but I definitely still, especially those first few episodes for me, there were some really hard hitting emotional moments that I felt like if I didn't have some prior knowledge about the franchise and who Percy is, like they definitely wouldn't have hit as hard.
One of the other things I noticed too that was so shocking for me is like when we got to watch the footage at New York Comic Con, we got to see like whatever it was, 15 total minutes of footage across a few different scenes.
Yeah.
That was like admittedly, that was the first time I got to see any type of footage in a convention or expo of any kind that was like brand new with that many people. But that was opening night Avengers Endgame level excitement when people like when Percy gets his pen for the first time, it's like everybody is like, wah! Wah! Like she's going absolutely bonkers.
Wondering what kind of pen it would be was a really big deal because the movies had a clicky pen and the books are very clear that it's like basically a Bic pen with a cap. So like getting that review.
And And that was, I think we may have just lost Erica there, but I'm sure she'll bounce back in. We'll get her to finish the point. But that was the coolest thing for me, is getting to be there with so many big Percy Jackson fans, and like having those reveals mean such a big deal. It inspired me to want to get more involved with this show, because it was so exciting for so many people. I want to kind of get everyone's thoughts now on how you are enjoying specifically the adaptation aspect so far, because obviously this is not the first time that Percy Jackson has gotten adapted, right? So I'll firstly throw it to Erica to finish that point, and then I'll get her thoughts on the adaptation aspect too. That was such unlucky timing, but it was also really funny. And so I'm not mad about it, because it was really funny.
Because I can't tell that I'm frozen on my end, and so I'll just keep talking, and then all of a sudden I'll see everybody go, and I'll think that I've said something like really insightful, because everybody is gasping at the same time, and then it turns out I just look like a fool, and my face is frozen. And anyway, my computer hates StreamYard, blah blah blah. That might happen again. Thank you for bearing with me. I have no idea what I was talking about. The pen, yeah, it was a big reveal. That's the end of the story.
And it was just really cool to see that, like, those different reveals that I didn't even really realize was a thing. And now I'm just so deep in Percy Jackson Twitter that I get to see all of these aspects now. And so each time, like, the big deal, it's like, oh, this is the Lotus Casino episode. What are they going to do this time? This was very controversial in the movie. And this is the next part I want to talk about, because obviously adaptation wise, I think if you know nothing about Percy Jackson and the Olympians, you can go into the movies. Shout out Logan Lerman. He did a great job, even though he was way too old. You can go in those movies and be like, these are campy, fun 2000s movies. You know, this is like Fantastic Four style a movie, even though it's maybe not high quality. I enjoy it. But in terms of an adaptation, not faithful, not so great. And obviously that was big in the news this week when Rick said normalize, was it erasing bad movies, forgetting about bad movies?
Normalize bad movie erasure in all caps.
Normalize bad movie erasure.
And then he deleted it.
He deleted it. Oops.
Sorry, Rick.
Oh. So, Eric, I want to throw this to you first, because that was, like, for one, that was hilarious. But what are your thoughts on this as an adaptation? And also, you specifically, because I know there's another fandom that we've talked about that you are maybe just as high on as Percy Jackson, and that's Avatar: The Last Airbender. This is your year. 2024 is your year, because
and Jet Wilkinson is my director. She works on both projects.
Basically the same time, right? Around the same time frame, Avatar: The Last Airbender and Percy Jackson and the Olympians get these so non-faithful adaptations. And now the creators are being back involved, and we're getting these television shows that are looking like obviously Percy Jackson, great so far, and Avatar: That Last Airbender is looking like it's going to be the same. What's it like for you, for your whole life's fandoms coming together right now at the same time? And then what do you think of the adaptation so far?
Oh, it's really wild. I've actually been, when Carter and I were trying to decide, like, we wanted to do a project during 2020. Like, our podcast was very much a pandemic project. We were debating between Percy Jackson or Avatar. The second choice was, let's start an Avatar podcast, because that's something else that we watched religiously as kids. Me, probably more so than Carter, and that's why we ultimately chose Percy Jackson, because Carter wasn't as into Avatar as I was, but that was like my, everything to me as a kid, and I have every episode memorized, and I've read all the graphic novels and etc. But the difference between the Percy Jackson adaptation and the Avatar adaptation is that Percy Jackson had no visual rep that was like approved by the fandom. Like, adapting something from animation to live action is really fun, but it's not as big a deal as like never getting a GIF that you can put on Tumblr, for your fandom. For years and years, we didn't have a GIF or videos or like anything like that. So this is like, the explosion is wild. I'm really excited to see Avatar, and it's going to make me cry. Does it feel like as much of a cultural watershed moment? Maybe not, but I'm really excited for both. And it's crazy that it's happening like a month apart.
I know we're like just over a month away from Avatar: The Last Airbender coming on Netflix. I can't wait to have you back on for that show. Introduce you to our friend Damon, who
awesome.
was also on at New York Comic Con, but not there that day. And he is the same way, like has memorized every episode of what has read all the graphic novels. I recently just did a Atla rewatch, and then I finished Legend of Korra for the first time, and I'm like messaging him throughout all of it. He's like, I want your live reactions throughout the whole thing. And so I'm looking forward to having you both on at the same time for that, because we'll I think there'll be some great conversations. Em, how about you? What are your thoughts on the adaptations so far? Not necessarily like in comparison to the movies, but just like getting to read the books, now seeing it on screen, very fresh in your memory. How has that been translating for you?
It's been really cool. And I think so there's been a lot of like book adaptations that have come out recently, and I'm very much of the camp that it shouldn't necessarily be a one-to-one adaptation. I don't think that's what, if people go into any live action or whatever adaptation of a book, don't expect it to be one-to-one. That's just not how that works. So I think they've been doing a really great job of keeping like, I mean, a lot of stuff has been pretty much ripped right from the pages from what I remember. It's doing a very good job at capturing the spirit of all the characters and the plot points. And I think it's just been really, really great so far. And the actor, like the casting was just perfect. Like all of these actors are like, and now that I'm reading Sea of Monsters, like I'm picturing the actors as the characters like while I'm reading, and I just think they just embody the characters so well. So I'm absolutely loving it.
Adam, how about you? You've gotten to not only watch the show after reading the books, but getting to edit the recaps that Brandon has been putting up on agentsfandom.com. Check them out if you haven't. He's doing a wonderful job. And you know what? Don't even have to go to our website. You can just Google Percy Jackson episode recap, and it's going to be on the damn first page. Woo! What have been your thoughts of the adaptation so far, Adam?
Well, I have to give proper credit where credit is due. As much as I would just love to take credit for work that isn't mine, Garrett, former Agents of Fandom podcast co-host, I guess no longer an Agents of Fandom podcast co-host, but he has been the one editing those articles, and him and Brandon have been working in unison. And just a special shout out to Brandon, who obviously he got screeners of the first 4 episodes, so he was able to kind of get those out on his own time and these things. But the last couple of weeks, he's watched the episode on Tuesday night, stayed up, and wrote the recap immediately after to get it out to help the website. Shout out to him for that, because that was just absolutely awesome. He's doing a great job. As far as the adaptation, yeah, 100%. As far as the adaptation, I'm really enjoying that aspect of it. And Em, I'm glad you brought up the kind of one-to-one thing, because I think, and I experienced this last year around the same time with The Last of Us, like a franchise that's very, very important to me, that's similar to what Erica was talking about. We already have like plenty of visual representation, like actually more visual representation that they're kind of trying to cut down, similar to this. Because like having reread, I'm an audiobook person, so rereading the Percy Jackson book like I did recently, I did it on Audible, and I think it's like 13 or 14 hours. And obviously in this series, we're not getting 13 to 14 hours for the content, so there's going to be some things that they have to cut out. So if people go in expecting this to be a one-for-one thing, they're like setting themselves up for disappointment. But I think what this series is doing so well is like the changes and the things that they like, the minor things, because like this still feels very faithful. But what we're getting feels complementary and not like contradictory, which to me, that's like the key to getting like a really good, faithful adaptation. Like obviously it's never going to be one for one, and nailing the characters too, like you said, Em, is the most important thing. And just like I can when I think back to the moments of like reading and listening to this book, more like the voice, I can't think of off the top of my head of the guy who voices Percy, or like the guy who voices the entire book on Audible. But there's so many times where like I find, because I've been re-listening to the book actually as well for the last couple of weeks, kind of like getting myself up to the points that it's been going on in the show. And I've been doing the same thing. Like, oh my God, this is like so Percy. Walker in particular, I think, is doing such a great job embodying the character, which that's the most important thing for getting a good adaptation, is for, even if like the material and the story that you're following is obviously going to have to kind of maneuver some changes, the characters need to feel authentic to who they are. And they knocked that out for the show, I think.
When I was younger, the book series that I read all the time it's from an author called Darren Shan, and it was the Vampire Saga. And it was my favorite. I loved it so much. As soon as they came out with a new book, I was getting it immediately, reading the whole thing immediately. And they actually did a movie adaptation as well in 2009. The series is called Cirque du Freak. and that was the movie Cirque du Freak, Vampire's Assistant. Loaded up on this all-star cast, you know, John C. Reilly, Josh Hutcherson, Salma Hayek, Willem Dafoe, Ray Stevenson, rest in peace, like just in an all-star cast. And this movie's just so trash. It's so bad. It's a horrible adaptation. They like focused on the unimportant things and left out the important things. And like, there's 10 books of just gold that they could have put into like 3 or 4 or 5 really great movies. And it's just so campy and bad. And I was so disappointed. And so getting faithful adaptations is so important, because when you hear adaptation, sometimes that can be a great thing. Other times it's just people absolutely just doing nonsense to some of your favorite characters. I don't think I need to tell people to look up a trailer for the Dragon Ball Z movie that came out in the late 2000s as well. But like, my God, that is some terrible, terrible content. Going into the episode.
I like what,
you go ahead.
I was just going to say, I like what Adam said about it being like complimentary, because I think that's really, it's to me, like I was thinking of Daisy Jones and the Six that popped into my head. It's like one of my favorite books of all time. And obviously it's a whatever, like 300 page or 400 page book. And there's so much story in there. And it just is genuinely one of the best books ever. And then the adaptation, I love the TV show, because again, it's only 9 episodes, 10 episodes. You're not going to be able to get everything in there, but now you have a live action, like the band performing the songs that you had to like think of how they sounded in your head. And now you have both. So like I can reread the book anytime I want. I can listen to the audiobook with a full cast, and I can watch like the perfect actors playing these characters. And so it's like a really cool thing to have like all of those different things in that world. So I just love it. I love when they get it right, because then you just have all this like content to enjoy.
I just want to shout out the I'm sorry to cut you off. TJ, you're just getting cut off left and right now. But I am going to I will never miss the opportunity to shout out what I think is like the best addition to any kind of adaptation of all time, which like lines up with everything that we're saying right now, which is episode 3 of The Last of Us with like the Bill and Frank stuff. That's like the perfect way to like add something and I think that's like one of the best episodes of TV probably ever written, ever made. But that's like the perfect way, because that wouldn't line up at all in the games. Like for people that have played the games, no, that's not at all how things work. But for like that story, for what they were telling with that story, it's perfect. And I think they're doing a lot of that, much like on a little bit of a smaller scale with Percy, like some like little changes and things, like not, hey, we're going off the rails for a whole episode that focuses on like Hermes or Chiron or something like that. Like, no, we're not getting anything like that. But like these little changes feel very much in the same vein as like what we got with like The Last of Us episode 3.
I can't remember who it was in the Agents of Fandom group chat, but I want to just like get this on the record before I forget about it, because I think it'd be great. Obviously, with Stephen Yeun having been cast as Sentry in the MCU and then getting recast, and now that's still the process of being recast is up there. Adam Copeland, aka Edge, who plays Ares in this series, I think would make for a very interesting Sentry. I think he'd be absolutely able to crush that in the MCU. Adam Copeland has crushed it as Ares in this series. And I think him as Sentry could be a very interesting thing moving forward. We have one more movie series adaptation coming that this group is a big fan of in the future, and I think we still could go either way. We don't know, but Adam, I'm hoping for you for God of War, my man. We got our fingers crossed that this is going to be a Last of Us. It's going to be a Percy Jackson and not the movies of our youth. And so fingers crossed. But Erica, I want to throw it to you first here. Let's start talking about the episodes specifically of sort of the first half of the series, episodes 1 through 4. Until seeing some screeners, some footage at New York Comic Con, we still don't have what we have hoped, because the authors are obviously involved, but you don't know for sure it's going to be it. What was it like watching the first few episodes and realizing like, fuck yeah, they did it?
Oh boy. Okay. First of all, if I freeze, just keep going without me. But it literally, I cannot express in words the level of vindication I felt watching the first 4 episodes, me and my co-host Carter. Basically, the experience was we had no idea what to do going in. We got on a Zoom call and watched the first 4 screeners together. Like, we recorded it just in case we ever want to like put that on Patreon or something, but like it felt important to have the experience like together as fans and as friends before trying to like do content with it and to just absorb it. And it was like the most magical thing I've experienced, because it felt like the themes that we have always felt were most important about the books were pulled forward immediately into the TV show. Like our podcast, we talk a lot about Percabeth. That's kind of the foundational thesis statement, as we try to ask, is Percabeth the greatest love story ever told? So we track that relationship development, which is being done beautifully in the series. But something else that we started to talk about a lot, especially as you get into the second series of Heroes Olympus, is the idea of monstrousness. And how do you imagine who in this world is a monster, and how do you treat them differently, whether they're a monster or a mortal or a demigod? What does that actually mean in how we go about treating other people and what we owe each other? And that was instantly brought into the first episode with the scene between Sally and young Percy, as Percy is trying to figure out what kind of hero he wants to be. And that's like ultimately why we love this story so much, because Percy is not your typical like 12-year-old boy swinging a sword around. Like what makes him cool isn't the fact that he has water powers or has a shiny sword. What makes him so impactful as a protagonist is that he chooses when not to use a sword, and he understands the value of nonviolence and letting go of like toxic ideas of heroes and everything, and choosing what he wants to do with his own life. And all of that is stuff that doesn't necessarily get played into until later on in the series, or even into the next series. And having that pulled to the forefront was so wild. And we got a chance to talk with John Steinberg, the showrunner, and everybody who we've ever talked to so far who's worked on the show has been so like genuinely want to know what we think, which is the wildest thing, because they like really want to know that the fans are like get feedback from the fans basically. And he was like, what do you guys think? Genuinely tell me what you think of the first 4 episodes. And we were like, when we have negative criticisms, we'll get back to you, because right now it is just nailing it. Like you have highlighted everything that we care about. And so shocking, especially episode 3 of that first 4 set. I was like, whoa, this is everything we could have wanted from the Medusa adaptation.
I was going to say the stuff they do with Medusa specifically is such a wonderful play on that monstrousness that you talked about. And it was really cool to see as well in my interview. Leah was talking about, like, obviously this whole cast is crazy. Like these are 3 teens asking to lead, like that are being asked to lead an entire series of an all-star cast. And so that was one of my questions, like, who of this group did you go like, oh wow, I love them? Like, and Leah was saying for her that was Jessica Parker Kennedy, who played Medusa, because she was such a impactful actor in the things she had watched growing up, which was cool to me, because she of course plays XS as well in the Flash CW series, which I really enjoyed. And so getting to see Jessica Parker Kennedy just absolutely crush it as Medusa in that 3rd episode was really, really cool. And what did you think of the first half of that season? Like, the same for you, of when you're seeing this on screen, you mentioned like now that you're reading, you get to see it as these characters. This casting is perfect.
Yeah, it's genuinely perfect. Like I don't know, they just did such a good job. And I like the 3 main kids are obviously amazing, and they're just kind of how I would have pictured them. And then all the guest stars are so cool. Like my personal favorite guest star has been Timothy Amundsen, which you've probably seen me talk about on Twitter. He's the star of one of my favorite shows ever, Psych. And so a few years ago, he had a pretty bad stroke, and he was he became disabled because of it. But he's done so much like rehab and has gotten himself back to the point where he's acting again. And it's just like warms my heart to see him back in something. And for his like small bit of, and I know this is the later half of the episodes, but for his small bit of screen time, like he absolutely killed it. And it's just so cool to see all of these different, like, you read about the gods in the books, obviously, but then like seeing these really cool guest stars like play the god. I don't know, it's just such a cool experience to me. And I think like the 3 main kids plus all these stars just makes it a really excellent like viewing experience. And I think they really like the first 3 episodes specifically, they really like nailed like the beginning of the book and like the roots and everything that you need to know, like kind of going forward with his story. So I just have been having such a good time, like literally looking forward to Tuesdays every week. And I don't know what I'm going to do when it's over, because then Tuesdays are just going to go back to sucking. So I don't know.
It's so funny. You bring up these amazing it is cool how like the amazing cast is kind of brought in as these different gods who play one like important parts in an episode, and it's not necessarily the huge role going forward, but when they're there, they steal the show. And it's so funny watching kind of just being so from promoting all of our content, being so deep in the Percy Jackson Twitter now, of seeing how it varies from like, is it Persabeth or is it Perkabeth? Well, of course it's Persabeth. That's how it sounds. I don't care.
Where is the hard K sound?
I don't care if that's grammatically, phonetically correct. It doesn't make sense with their names. It's Persabeth. But then you see the other side, and it's like Lin-Manuel Miranda, and it's like me, the lightning thief, hiding the lightning bolt, the master bolt up my ass, as he's doing this like cross-legged pose thing. It's like,
the worst
it's so
part
funny.
That is I know Lin has definitely seen that meme by now, and I know he's seen it. And I'm sorry, Lin. I'm sorry that you had to see that.
That's the funniest part of this, is the people involved are so like involved. It's like you said. They all want to know the fans' feedback. They're all online. Like, Becky followed me on Twitter, and I feel so honored every time. I have two jobs, right? There's Agents of Fandom, and then I work for Roto Grinders, which is a fantasy sports company. Anytime I do my sport, like I have to repost my sports articles and content, I can't help but think like, damn, what is Becky thinking about this? Is she gonna unfollow me? Like, exactly. I'm so worried about it.
Anything I post, I'm like, is Becky gonna unfollow me when she sees this? Every time.
She is all of our moms at this point, and it's just tough to worry about. Adam, what have you thought about the first few episodes? What really stuck out to you, either from like the adaptation standpoint, or just like enjoying it from a television perspective?
So I'll say I actually enjoyed the first. I mean, this isn't an indictment on the more recent episodes, but I enjoyed the first few episodes more, 1 and 2 in particular, because while I think that the 3 kids do such a great job, especially Ari and Samadri, I think he has been absolutely phenomenal in playing Grover. Like, he's been my favorite of the bunch by far, personally. But I think the rest of them are all great. But in the first episode, we get a whole lot of Percy's mom. And the second episode, we get a whole lot of Chiron. So there's like a pretty fair balance of like adults and kids. And I also want to shout out Brandon again for talking about this in his review. This isn't an indictment again. I hate even having to say this, but the acting from some of the kids has been a little bit spotty at times for me. It's not quite always been there. I agree with Brandon in saying that, but I'm also like, they're all still kids, and I'm willing to, and they acknowledge that, I believe, in their interview with you, TJ. I saw their interview with somebody else where they were like, without our acting coach, this wouldn't even be a show, because it was like really rough. So, and I don't think that's as much of a problem in the earlier episodes, when we've got like a lot of this contrast between, hey, these are the kids and these are the adults. And oftentimes like there's adults with the kids. But in the last couple episodes, we get a lot more of like, they're asking the kids to do a lot, like carrying these episodes on their back. And I think for the most part, they're doing really good. But there are a few scenes where I'm just kind of like, I think that like the acting threw me out of it a little bit. And again, that's not like, I'm not like, oh my God, they suck, they were terrible. Like, it's nothing at all like that. But that's just for me why I personally enjoyed the first couple episodes a little bit more. And I don't know, like, if we're gonna translate back to kind of that dynamic in the beginning, or if it's gonna be. It seems like we're probably gonna get a little more of the focus on like the kids still as we move forward. But it's just been hard because all the adults in the show have been so great. I thought Edge was going to be a terrible actor. I like am all the way out. Like, I used to be, I guess, like, I love John Cena, and especially now, and I love Dave Bautista. So I don't even know why I had this prejudice in my head that like, because Edge was a wrestler, he was just going to be a terrible
because
actor.
of The Rock.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, because The Rock just plays the same thing in everything he's in. We all know that. But I was like, when I saw that, even in the trailers and everything else, I was like, oh man, like, I just don't know if I'm going to be bought into that. He was great. He was like absolutely awesome. I could not get over how much I loved him. And then it's just, so to see that contrast has been a little bit distracting, but I don't know. Overall, that's like that's like the kind of thing that takes it from like a 9.5 to like a 9.2 or 3. That's like where I'm at with these kinds of things. It's such a small thing, but I'm still gonna, you know me, TJ, I got to call attention to at least one negative thing every time you ask me about something. That's just who I am at this point. So that's it for this episode. But other than that, everything else has just been knocked out of the park, 10 out of 10. I'm loving it.
I'm never going to. And so when Garrett left, somebody had to do it. And so that's your role. But I do think it's one of those things too, where it's like, because the entire cast is not just good, but fantastic. When there are people with less experience in comparison to them, it does kind of show a little bit. But I think what they nailed with this casting so perfectly as well, all three of them are great actors. They're Percy, Grover, and Annabeth. Yeah. And so that is, I think, what is going to be the most important thing with them going forward, and will continue to allow them to crush going forward. And I'll agree with you with Aryan and Adam Copeland, Edge. That scene was one of the best of the series. Of like that, they just acted their asses off at each other, and it was awesome. It was very, very riveting. It was obviously a completely different scene and a completely different scenario, but it reminded me of almost a little bit of like Daredevil and Punisher going back at each other the first time we actually got to meet them in person, see them in person. While it's a totally different scene, it was like, I don't know which one is going to come out on top in this match of wits, and it's so exciting. Carrying into these later episodes, because obviously that was last week, and now this week it was the Lotus Flower Casino. Erica, you were nodding about the Adam Copeland stuff, so I want your take on that as well. But then feel free to carry into this most recent episode, because I want to know your thoughts on it, and I want to know your thoughts on how they handled the differences, because this is really the first one where it's not like, ooh, small changes. It's like actual clear plot details are being swapped.
Oh, yeah. Well, Adam Copeland was amazing. Episode 5 is like the meaning of my life because of the Percabeth of it all. That was a great episode we got to record on our podcast about just everything that they did in that episode to develop Percy and Annabeth's relationship. And I also agree that Aryan Simhadri eats down and has completely changed the role of Grover for me. I used to be a Grover hater in the books. And now I'm a Grover stan, full through and through. I truly think that book Grover in 1 through 5 is terrible and not my friend, but Chalice of the Gods Grover, because he's basically just written to be Aryan, is so cute, and Aryan just is so good at playing that part and bringing himself to it. The Lotus Hotel and Casino episode, when I first watched it, I didn't know how to feel, and I think that was exactly the point, that it is meant to be ethereal and strange and throw you for a bit of a loop, and to get in and out and be like, what just happened? That was really weird. Obviously people online were like, I wonder what they're gonna do. I'll call myself out. I thought it was gonna be a musical episode. I was full in on that conspiracy theory. I dropped in for that conspiracy. It made sense. I was like, Lynn's gonna sing in the Lotus Hotel and Casino. Why wouldn't he? Joe Trace, who wrote the Lightning Thief musical book, is in the writer's room for the whole season and worked a lot on this episode. Why wouldn't they make it a musical? They didn't make it a musical. But I think ultimately it was a stronger choice to have it be like the entire series. And what has made this adaptation so strong coming from the books is that they prioritize relationship and character over flashy set pieces and like big fight scenes and everything. So even though I would have wanted some kind of big choreographed dance number with all the amazing extras and all the amazing costumes that they put them in from all the different decades, it ultimately serves the story to a much greater extent to have it focus on getting to know a little bit more about Grover's plotline with Pan and how this is something that means a lot to him because we're setting this up for future seasons, and also being able to set up more the fact that we lose ourselves when we are alone. And something that is very important about the series is how we find our camaraderie in fighting against the big bad guy. So ultimately, I think it was smart. The whole decision about throwing off the solstice dates, I don't want to say anything until we get to the finale. I do think that it was a cool choice to give the fans of the book something to be confused about. To switch up the plot enough that you're still engaged with it, even though if you've read The Lightning Thief 1 million times. Now, what are they going to do with 4 pearls instead of 3? What are they going to do now that the deadline has passed? How do we maintain the stakes? The last thing I'll say about that is that we know, obviously, from this episode, Kronos is coming, and that's kind of like what we're keeping an eye out for. The end of The Lightning Thief doesn't set up The Last Olympian as well as the end of this season sets up The Last Olympian. I think that the benefit of how they've adjusted the end of this season is to prepare us for the overarching arc of all 5 books, as opposed to just like a neat little bow on season 1.
And they do it in a big way, because now, as someone who knows nothing about the future books, but like I said, I've been pretty deep in the Percy Jackson Twitter. I'm really like, so one of my very all-time favorite parts about the Marvel Cinematic Universe is they'll take something small that was said in a movie 8 years ago, and then they'll make a big deal out of it, and it was actually a huge thing in something 12 movies later. Now, what we've learned about the MCU is almost all of the time that wasn't planned originally. It was a full-on accident that a great writer takes in the future, and they go, "Ooh, I can do something with that," and they turn it into a fantastic story. They're planning stuff out early on here in Percy Jackson from a character named Nico, who's going to be appearing in the future, who apparently we hear yelling in this episode. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Okay, I haven't had time yet because I've been at work all day to go back to the exact timestamp that people identified. I think it's like 12 minutes and 30 seconds where they say that Nico can be heard yelling Bianca in the background. Nico is my favorite character in the entire series. He's my comfort character, so I was definitely ready to pause and look for him. And Becky confirmed that they did put in like an audio cue. She wasn't sure if it made it into the show or not, but people are saying that you can hear it because Nico and Bianca, if you don't know these characters, they get introduced in the third book, and they are, you find out retroactively that they have been trapped in the Lotus Hotel and Casino for a long period of time. So theoretically, they would be here in this scene when Percy and Annabeth and Grover make it to the hotel.
That's so cool.
I love that stuff.
I love me too. I eat that shit up.
That's like we're not going to see that for like 4 years minimum, but now we get to see it here. It's great.
So
Em,
cool.
what do you think of this episode?
Yeah, I thought I love everything that you said, Erica, because I think like, so that's honestly my favorite chapter in The Lightning Thief. Like we take a zebra to Las Vegas. It like sticks out to me. I'm definitely, I need to like reread books multiple times. There's big plot points that I'll remember, but I will forget like everything I read like the next day. So I have to like go back and remember like some of the smaller details, but I just remember that chapter sticking out to me. And so I was like really excited for this to be adapted. I definitely think it's interesting. I like how they're kind of keeping people on their toes that like, you know, have read the books and are like, all right, well, we know exactly what's going to happen. It's like, well, maybe you don't. Like, maybe it's going to throw you for a little bit of a loop and kind of like keep us guessing. So I think that was a really cool choice to change. Like, if they were going to change anything, I think it's really interesting that they did that. But I loved like the kind of vibe of it. It was very, very much like the book with, you know, they step in the casino, they're like, what the hell is going on? They figure out there's some weird shit happening. They're like, what time is it? What day is it? Like, I think it was done really well. Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. I also thought it was hilarious with Walker driving that car. I'm like, this poor kid. You have a 24-year-old sitting in the back seat. Like, why isn't he driving? I get he was confused, but like, this poor kid is like crashing into everything. So that was really funny, and it's definitely more like Percy Beth's development with that, and I don't know. I really did enjoy it. I did want to see a zebra though. I was a tiny bit disappointed that we didn't see a zebra, but other than that, yeah, I'm like, that's like I remember that's like the zebra, and I did think it was funny seeing some of the other animals and Grover kind of being like, oh, like the people, oh, whatever. That's like honestly so real. Like I would do the same thing. So I just thought it was great. Definitely moved the plot forward a bit. And yeah, it's just I liked it a lot.
The other exciting aspect of it is it brings in, like, it's like you said, to people who have read, it's like you said, Erica, to the people who have read the books. Now going in, if you haven't seen the screeners, which I haven't, Em and Adam, I know you haven't. Have you seen the last couple episodes, Erica? You have, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. And so it's like, it's a new surprise. It's a new thing of, we don't know what's coming next. You can't track it. And I think this is going to really bring to what you were saying, Adam, earlier with, it's not going to be a 1-for-1 adaptation. And they're really showing that going into these last few episodes.
Yeah. Erica and him pretty much hit on all that kind of stuff perfectly. I especially like what Erica said, that it's like the point of these is to keep the audience guessing, because it's like the first season of House of the Dragon is really, really good about this too. I don't know how many people have read the book, so I won't spoil anything, but I haven't read any of A Song of Ice and Fire, but I did read A Song of Fire and Blood before that series. And there was like one big thing, I think around episode 6 or 7, that happened that like brought the same thing out of me, that I was like, wait, whoa, that like also they like dropped a few little changes in with it. I was like, wait a minute, how are they going to do this going forward? And they ended up tying it up in a way that was like still a little bit different, yeah, but it was like also really satisfying and felt rewarding for like having read the book. So I hope we get something like that here. But I mean, overall, I have no problem with like because I think if you're gonna make a change, like just make it good, and they made it good in this episode, man. This episode fucking rocked. I don't know. I love the casino shit, all that kind of stuff, and especially all the like the aging, the not knowing, all that shit. That just works for me. That's my shit right there. When when Percy starts realizing like, he's like, wait, we were supposed to go on a quest. Wait, were we? And then like Grover, he find him doing the VR gaming stuff, and he just has Ari Samaji was great in that scene. He's like, you guys are my best friends? Oh, okay. We're going on a quest? Okay. I was just losing it. That was, oh my God. The kids, I actually thought this was like their best performance. They did a great job with this episode. And I think, as much as I did enjoy some of the first ones, like I think, and I didn't, like they lost me a little bit in the middle. Not lost me, like I said, 9-5 down to 9-2, but they brought me right back up with this one. I love this episode.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. One thing I want to, before I throw it back to Erica here, one thing I want from each of you, Adam and Em, is pardon me, do you have any big kind of predictions going into the last episode here as they switch things up? Em, I'll throw it to you first. Like if not, that's fine. But how do you think this could potentially be resolved? They've passed the solstice. They got it's like his meeting didn't go this way. They get an extra beat. Like how do you think this is going to come through?
I mean, yeah, the missing the solstice is really interesting. I actually have no idea how they're gonna like wrap that up. I think so. I'm like kind of sitting here like, you know what? I'm just gonna like go along for the ride because I'm really curious to see how they're gonna like tie that up. But I do think he's gonna lose one of the like beads because it would make sense. That's the one thing. It's like, all right, well, he needs to make that decision. So I think that would be the only way to like get him to that point. So that's my only prediction. Other than that, like, I just think we're going to see some shit go down in the underworld, and I think it's going to be really cool.
So yeah, I was going to say, sorry, Adam, 3 pearls instead of 4. Do you got any theories on that, or are you along with Em just going along for the ride?
For at least not for the 3 pearls versus 4, but like missing the solstice, I'll just channel my inner Bruce Banner and say time travel. No, I'm just kidding. I really hope we don't. I hope we don't get anything like that, because that just seems like that would kind of take us into a completely different show in a completely different direction. And that seems like the kind of thing that Rick and Becky would not be okay with. Like they're like, hey, I thought we kind of got over all this stuff in the movie, like doing all this time travel kind of bullshit. So I hope it's nothing too crazy like that. But I'm on the record on this show saying so many times, like I'm so horrible at predicting that. Like I just immediately want to go to whatever I think is like not going to happen, and like the opposite of what I say is, because that seems to usually be like what happens the most, because people, they lay these things out in shows so often where like other people will predict it and they'll be like, I bet this is what's coming. And I'm like, I didn't see that coming at all. It can be the most obvious thing. And that's just not, I guess my brain is just not designed to pick up on those kinds of cues, which I'm kind of just calling myself an idiot right there, but you know, whatever.
No, I do the same thing. I never pick up on anything. And then I'm like, oh, and then it made so much sense going back. I'm like, I should have known that.
And like I'll watch movies with like my friends, and they'll like lean over and be like, I bet later he's gonna do this, and I'm like, wait, what? Like, why would that happen? And then it happens, and I'm like, wait, how did you even know that was the thing that was coming?
That's me.
That's my boyfriend.
I'm a chronic predictor.
It's so funny because I'll show my boyfriend Chris like stuff, and I'm like so excited to show him, like, yeah, and then I'm like, he's never gonna guess. Like I showed him like Saltburn recently, and he never guessed, or he like guessed like the main twist like soon. I was like, okay. And so I said, and I have to like gaslight him. I'm like, no, that's not what happened. Like, wait, you see, whatever. And I'm like, he guessed it so early on. I'm like, this just ruins my experience and showing somebody else something. I'm like, next time keep it to yourself. But he's just so good on like piecing clues together. And I could, like, if I really wanted to sit and like think, and I probably could, but I'm just usually sitting there like, oh no, like I don't know, like I'm just gonna let it happen. Then something obvious will happen, and I'm just like, oh wow, I'm totally surprised. Like, so my brain just doesn't work that way.
There's a few actors that, regardless of what it is, if I see them in something, I'm gonna watch it. And it's like Andrew Garfield, Jake Johnson, and one of them is Michelle Yeoh. And I saw there's a new show on Netflix called The Brothers Soon. And I've been watching. We just finished it last night, and I predicted like one of the big twists as soon as I met a character who's involved in a big twist, and I was so proud of myself. I met them, and I was like,
That's the worst.
Wait a minute. And then as soon as the big twist happened, I was just like, yes, I did it. And just celebrating.
I fully acknowledge that that's my worst character trait in real life, is doing that to people. And I'm trying to work on keeping it to myself, because I can't stop. I'm going to still play the game with myself, but I'm trying not to say it out loud to my friends who get really pissed off when I'm like, hey, I know that character is going to betray that character. And they're like, what? You can just tell me after and I'll believe you. You predicted it all along. You're like, okay.
I feel like Thor.
I need to show you my proof.
Surprised. I feel like Thor just remaining surprised after Loki has betrayed me like 16 times in a row. And I'm like, how have I not seen this coming? Like, this has happened so many times. I don't know. I just got a soft spot for being stupid.
I'm like, I want to just like have the satisfaction of like having somebody else, like, I don't know, just for Chris specifically. Like, I just, one of these days I need him to like watch something that I've already seen and just not guess it, or just like anything, honestly. I just want him to not like use his brain while he's watching something sometimes. If he watches this episode, like, this is my request. Like, I just want to have like, because I just love, like, I don't know, I don't like guessing things early on, because then it kind of, I like spoil it for myself. Is then I know I love a big plot twist. So I don't know, this is a total like ramble, but that's just my take on that.
The podcasting. That's called podcasting.
Yeah, that's all we do. The key though is, like, Erica, we have to find those of us like that who are also like that, so then it's not ruining it for anybody. And my wife's like that too. And then... yeah, Damon on our team is like that. Like, we watched when we all got together. There's a bunch of us who got together in California at the beginning of 2023, and Damon is sitting beside me at the movie theater, and through all of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, it's like, do you think this? Do you think this? This is going to happen. This is going to happen. And he was 5 times as bad as me. Like, I do that all the time, and he was like the entire movie non-stop.
Oh, yeah. I will say one more thing on that like, where you see a movie, I feel like totally depends, because living in New York the past few years, I have become the worst at movie theaters. I went and saw Fast X in LA with my sisters, and they were like, Erica, you have to shut up. People don't talk in movie theaters here. And like, when Jason Momoa came out, I was like, yeah. And they were like, shh. And I was like, oh, this is not the Lincoln Square AMC. I'm so sorry. Let me tone it down a little.
Oh, that's actually so incredibly true. But I think, honestly, I think Fast and the Furious movies, you get a pass. You can always do that at Fast and the Furious movies, because that's what they are. Like, that's what they're there
for. Escape Fast and Furious talk.
I'm bringing it up every podcast, and I didn't even have to this time. It was
find a way to tie the Fast and Furious to it. Oh,
much like Percy Jackson, much like Echidna says in episode 4 of Percy Jackson, this has always been a family story.
So there you go. Oh. That's true.
Yes,
family.
Yes, and that right there is why we will.
A great episode, but
that is why, as the person in charge of bringing our guests on, you will be back for Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Oh, but I have much to say.
On that note, before we get out of here, plug all the stuff you have going on Seaweed Brain Podcast. Let us know where we can find your episodes, but also you talk to the showrunner. Who else did you talk to? Where can the people find those?
Oh, okay. You can find Seaweed Brain wherever you listen to podcasts, called Seaweed Brain Podcast. We're definitely mostly on Spotify. We do all the polls and Q&As and stuff there, so that's a great way to interact with the show. You can follow us on all social medias at Seaweed Brain Podcast, even on TikTok. Sometimes we're on YouTube, on Patreon. We've been doing live streams every week, so if you ever have to watch the episode alone, or you've been watching the episodes alone, you can find us on Patreon to do a little watch party, so you don't have to watch the episodes by yourself. That's been really fun. We participated in press for the show, so we got to talk to the showrunners. We even got to talk to Rick and Becky. We have some really cool interviews lined up that I don't want to jinx, but they'll be coming out in the next few weeks. We have an episode with staff writer Daphne Olive on episodes 1 through 4 that's up. We'll be talking to her again later in the season. We've got an episode with Charlie Bushnell, who plays Luke, which will be dropping after the finale for specific reasons. And yeah, it'll all of that stuff is out and then also coming in the works. So just go and find us and turn your notifications on and follow us and send me a message if you want to talk spoilers.
Check out Seaweed Brain Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you so much for joining us. This has been an absolute blast. We'll definitely have you back on for Avatar because, yeah, like I said, this has been great. And make sure you tune in to the Agents of Fandom podcast next week, because we will be talking more Percy Jackson and the Olympians with our fellow agent Brandon Moore, as well as host of Riptide Radio from comicbook.com, Liam Crowley, will be joining the show once again. And we will be talking more Percy Jackson and many great things beyond. I'm lining up a specific date, but I know we will have our friend Carolina Ravassa, who of course played Queen Isabella in the Kahori episode of What If. She's going to be coming back on the podcast to hang out and talk about that as well. And you can find my interviews with the cast of Percy Jackson and the Olympians up on YouTube, on agentsfandom.com, wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure to check out Brandon's recaps after each episode of Percy Jackson on the website as well. Thank you to everyone who joined in today. Make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell on YouTube. Leave us a nice 5-star rating wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you're subscribed. Follow us on socials at Agents Fandom on Twitter and TikTok, Agents of Fandom everywhere else. Before I was about to conclude, because I just to save time, I don't really let Adam say a goodbye anymore. I just say on behalf of myself and Adam, and then we go. But Em, I want to make sure that people know where they can find you on socials. So I'm gonna cut off Adam, but you still get to tell where they can find you.
Excellent. So on Twitter, you can find me at _EMMINEM. It's like Eminem, like the rapper. And then on Letterboxd at Emma Jacqueline, Jaclyn. And those are the only ones those are the ones I've been using mostly. So we're just gonna keep it at that.
Adam, we haven't done this for a while, and so I actually do want you to plug your socials as well, because you are seeing so many movies all the time and you give such great reactions. So as much as I make fun of you for things, I want to make sure you actually get credit where it is due as well. So where can the people find you on socials?
Honestly, how dare you just kind of put me on the spot like this? After then, no, I'm just kidding. Adam Blevins _ on Twitter, but honestly, that's pretty much the only place that I share any kind of reactions to movies. But more importantly, just check out agentsoffandom.com. That is where you can find all of my movie reviews. I just finished writing a review for a show that I'm going to take this opportunity to sing the praises of a show that I want people to watch, and it's called Shogun. It's coming out on Hulu, I believe, on February 27th. And this show is so good that they literally sent this to us in January. And we're like, talk about it as much as you want. We don't care. Like, we'll give you a review embargo, but talk about it on socials or your podcast as much as you want, because we know we made a show that kicks ass. And they were absolutely right. It kicks ass. So please, 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 people, watch that show when it comes out. It's incredible. I could go on about it for like 15 to 20 minutes. I'm not going to do that. But yeah, Adam Blevins _ on Twitter. And then just check out agentsofandom.com for everything else. But TJ, thank you so much for not cutting me off this time. That's just like so kind of you.
Sometimes time efficiency is important, but it rarely is more important than friendship. So you're welcome. On behalf of myself and family, of course. Family. Great point, Emma.
You ruined it.
On behalf of myself, TJ Zwarch, the whole Agents of Fandom team, thank you to everyone who tuned in today, and we will see you next week to talk some more Percy Jackson. Peace.
Peace.